if you're going to claim that classical music is a global project, then it has to be constantly expanding. It is a global project. Every country has its classical music, but also we have what we call Western classical music, right?
Right.
Which can come in a variety of traditions, and therefore it stands to reason that everyone can participate. And not only that, but I mean, historically, everyone did participate. There have always been women composers.
Yeah.
We just didn't talk about them. My name is Mahan Esfahani, and I'm your guest soloist for the album.
Yes, and what instrument do you play?
I'm a harpsichordist.
Oh, so how did you get started playing harpsichord?
I just always liked it. I played piano, and well, one thing led to another.
Did you have a moment when you saw a harpsichord being played and you were like, that's my instrument?
I mean, I grew up in DC, which is a city that basically culturally nothing has ever happened in DC ever. But I do remember there were concerts, sort of local chamber music concerts. There would be a harpsichord, and I would always sort of get my father to take me to this concert because I knew there would be a harpsichord. And I was probably like 9 or 10, and yeah, I was always fascinated by them.
Did you acquire your first harpsichord, or how did you start playing the instrument?
Well, I mean, acquiring a harpsichord is not such an easy thing to do. So we acquired a kit.
Okay.
Because they sold sort of, do-it-your-own harpsichords at one time, and it's a very sort of 80s, 90s thing.
Wow.
And yeah, we made one, and with my father in the garage, and well, I mean, it was sort of half finished anyway, and sort of messing around with it, but I mean, I was a pretty serious pianist, and then I always sort of found my way back to the harpsichord. I mean, I didn't intend professionally to be a harpsichordist. It just sort of happened. I know that sounds very casual, but that's actually what happened. So,
okay.
Yeah.
I see. And then was there kind of a moment where you were like, okay, this harpsichord thing is like really starting to go, like, and you saw it as more of a career path, or was it always sort of a career path and not really a hobby, or where was that line?
I had left for Europe in 2006, and I was living in Italy and kind of working there for a while, doing musical odd jobs, working in opera a lot, and then in 2008 I got invited to be one of the BBC New Generation Artists, which was a sort of young artist program where they sort of help careers happen. And, that seemed like, okay, well, now now the public thinks that I can be a harpsichordist, so I guess I'll do it. And I mean, that was a program that a lot of pianists and string quartets and people went through, Paul Lewis, you had Pavel Haas Quartet, Alison Balsam on the trumpet, sort of people of that caliber. And, for them to have a harpsichordist was sort of unheard of. Okay,
so you were kind of one of the first doing that track. Is that what you're?
Well, no, there have been solo harpsichordists. I mean, obviously the music that we're doing on the recording was written in the 1950s for a harpsichordist who's Marcel Delacour, who was in Paris, who was a professional harpsichord player. Of course, we had Landowska and in France, and later in the United States, we had Ralph Kirkpatrick in this country. I mean, George Malcolm in England, and so on and so forth. So, I mean, no, there have been harpsichordists, but I mean, there's no set path. It just kind of like either you do it or you don't do it. I mean,
just kind of happened and started working out, and you got some recognition, and then
and one concert leads to two concerts, and then you're paying your rent, and then you think, okay, it just sort of happened.
So you grew up in the U.S., right? You grew up in Maryland.
Yes, just outside of D.C.
Yeah. So I think as someone that's also a musician that grew up in the States, there's kind of like this stigma about it. Like, oh, you're a musician. Like, can you really have a living? Like,
I think that comes from a place where people claim to like music but don't respect musicians. There's no nice explanation for that.
Right.
If people can't bring themselves to respect the artists, then they have no place listening to the music. Seriously, I'm quite unapologetic about that. I mean, I think I don't care for the sort of cavalier and casual way that Americans think of. Not all Americans, obviously. I mean, we're in the Midwest now.
Right.
I would say musicians are like quite respected in the Midwest.
Yeah, I would say so as well.
I'm amazed. I mean, you go town to town. There's orchestras. There's major music programs in schools. The Midwest is extremely appreciative of the arts, actually. But I mean, I think in New England there's a little bit still of the sort of heritage of the Puritans.
Right, it's by area, and it's kind of like a learned way that people have come to respect or understand music. And
don't forget the Midwest brings with it the heritage of largely of Central Europe. And what are people in the Midwest? I mean, they're German and Hungarian and Czech and Polish, and well, those are people who have classical music as their culture.
Yeah,
you know,
that's very true.
So,
we're going to kind of switch a little bit and talk more about the Equal Billing Project now.
Yeah,
so
okay.
how did you hear about the Equal Billing Project?
Well, I knew that Matthew Aubin had been doing sort of activity with the various orchestras that he directs around underrepresented composers, which is interesting to me, you know, because as a mentor of mine, George Lewis, who's a composer, says, if you're going to claim that classical music is a global project, then it has to be constantly expanding, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it is a global project. Every country has its classical music, but also we have what we call Western classical music, right?
Right.
Which can come in a variety of traditions. And I mean, therefore, it stands to reason that everyone can participate. And not only that, but I mean, historically, everyone did participate. I mean, there's a massive tradition of, you know, now we're recording the music of Fernand de Crook, and I mean, there have always been women composers.
Yeah.
We just didn't talk about them.
Absolutely.
Right? I was just actually in Boston at the bandstand of the Boston Pops. They have names of composers all around the bandstand. There's no names of female composers.
Really?
You'd think for like over 1,000 years, we've had female composers. Why are there no names of them?
Right.
And so, you know, obviously projects like this, you know, I think that music has a value on its own. But it does have to reflect the world and what it is and what it was, right? And so I think the Equal Billing Project, it's not some sort of like, the way I heard of it and the way I see it, it's not some sort of social engineering project at all. It's just reflecting reality.
Yeah. You were talking about, like, this is something that you feel very passionate about, is like giving composers of the past like equal recognition.
You know, I'm Iranian American. I mean, my background is Iranian. I mean, you know, by the views of some, what would I be playing, right? I mean, I participate in Western classical music because it's music that has given my life meaning. And so obviously I should afford the same space to composers. So, you know, I myself feel like a participant in that.
Okay.
And, you know, again, I mean, we're not asking for special treatment. We're asking for equal treatment.
Right.
And, you know, something that really drives me nuts is people say, oh, you know, women and other minority composers. Well, women are not a minority. I mean, they're half the population, right?
They've just been, like, the history of repression is more of the issue.
They've been overlooked.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
And Fernand de Crook is a wonderful example of that. I really, frankly, did not know about her music until Matthew Aubin told me about her music.
Okay.
So this is kind of a new thing for me.
I see.
So, you know, those kind of boundaries between listener and performer are very much blurred.
I see, yeah. So when you said you didn't know about her.
Not a thing.
So when you were kind of preparing for this recording project, did you, like, was researching her history part of that as well?
I went and read a lot about her milieu and sort of, you know, I had known about composers in France in the first, you know, half in the middle of the 20th century. And the amazing thing is when I spoke to scholars who worked in French music of that period, they hadn't heard of her either.
Okay.
So all quite new for me.
I see. So did you specifically reach out to people to ask them about this composer then?
I tried.
A little, you tried?
Yeah, I tried.
And just couldn't really find anything?
No, very little.
Wow, okay. Yeah, I mean, I did similarly, you know, just like even just a simple Google search,
Oh,
right? And
so
the
little.
only thing I find is the website that our conductor put together
Yes.
from his years of
Yeah, there's
research.
very,
like
very little.
That's all. So
Yeah.
it's really, I mean, it's kind of fascinating that he had to really kind of like plow into that world and find all the information himself. For the future of the Equal Billing Project, our vision is that recordings, sheet music, biographical information, and everything compiled from the Equal Billing Project are used to facilitate diverse representation in orchestral performances and music education. I wonder if you could talk about, especially with, maybe we'll start with music education, if you could talk about what your history classes might have looked like and what information like this could do for a general history class.
I mean, I first started looking at music history generally under the supervision of my own piano teacher. I mean, she gave us a lot of materials on music history. Look, it was mostly the great sort of pantheon canon of Bach and, there was Mozart and Beethoven, and then Schumann and Mendelssohn, and I mean, before Bach was like fairly hazy. I mean, my teacher was interested in earlier music, so she did talk about, well, for us, for keyboard players, Buxtehude obviously was an important person. I mean, everybody talked about Palestrina, obviously. I knew about Ockeghem and sort of Josquin and these composers, but women came up because my piano teacher she had been doing a PhD in musicology many, many years ago, and she didn't finish it, but she talked about Elisabeth Jacquet de la Guerre, who was a 17th century French composer, and she was the first woman to conduct at the Paris Opera, and she had written keyboard music. So because I was a keyboardist, of course, I knew about her. I knew about Clara Schumann. But for some it was very instrument specific. That was my music history. And of course, in high school when we did music, we never talked about these figures. I think also part of the issue is that in Western music we see music in terms of personalities, in terms of specific people. Right? It's this thing called sort of the great man or the great woman sort of theory of history, which is fine, I'm not against it, but there are social forces that also contribute to the creation of music.
Right.
Obviously, genius is a very personal thing. What I would see is a project like this. Again, it's not sort of pushing some sort of specific agenda. I think it's expanding. You would think that with humans having more information at their fingertips than they did 20 or 30 years ago, that humans would be sort of smarter and more, sort of considered, which apparently has not really turned out to be the case. But I mean, but I think we are at a crucial moment for music and society. I mean, music education, it creates both musicians and appreciators of music for a community. And communities are changing, and communities reflect different kinds of people. Music education doesn't exist so that everybody can go and become an orchestral musician or become a professional musician. Music education exists because without music and the arts and literature, I mean, then what meaning is there to life?
Yeah. What has been your experience playing with the Jackson Symphony?
Oh, very good. I've had a lovely time.
Yeah?
Because I came here a few months ago, and we did Fernand de Croix's Les Trianon. By the way, it may have been the first performance ever of the piece. There's no record of the piece ever being performed.
Really?
Yeah, a lot of her music, we have no record of being performed. Yeah.
Okay.
So it was written, and we think that there may have been a public reading of it, like a rehearsal, but it was never, there was no formal performance of it. So that was quite exciting.
That is.
No, I had an amazing time because, first of all, we did 3 performances. People were so lovely, so appreciative. And actually, what's really funny is after being in Jackson, Michigan for a week, I knew everyone and I knew their business. I've made friends. I keep in touch with. I mean, you and I keep in touch. It's really because sometimes you go to some places and you just go and you play and you never see them again.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And no, here it's been quite the contrary. I've had and actually while I was here, one of the bass players of the orchestra, who's also the education director, Jed Fritzenmeyer.
Yeah, Fritzenmeyer.
Yeah. He teaches orchestral music out in Chelsea. And so I got to go out there and see what the school music programs are, and I thought, I used to make a few radio documentaries for BBC, so I thought like, oh, it'd be really nice to come out here and do a program about what music education is around here, because it's really heads and shoulders above what's in the rest of the U.S. It is quite impressive. So yeah, that's how it's been.
Do you mean like size-wise, or like what makes
just
it
commitment.
impressive?
Like if you look at like what in Chelsea, out of a school of, I don't know what it was, 1,200 or something. You know, you had like, I don't know, 500 kids involved in orchestral and band music.
Right, yeah.
That's massive.
It is giant.
Yeah.
And Jed like kind of built that whole program himself.
And his whole family is invested in it.
Yeah,
and,
they're involved.
You know, we walked down the street and like everyone knew their orchestra teacher, and I thought, you know, again, it's not, musicians, we're not saying that we stand above society. We have to be part of society.
Right.
It was very encouraging to see.
Yeah, I mean, music is really a great way to create a community. We already spoke to this a little bit, but I feel like especially when you're younger, like getting that group involvement is such a big part of it. Yeah. Did you ever play when you were younger in some sort of ensemble or anything?
I did.
Like
I mean, I
that?
played in youth orchestra. I played violin. I played, wait for it, I played tuba in school orchestra.
Way. We caught that on video, right?
Yeah, you caught that on video. So every time I see I'm with an orchestra, I always go and chat to the tuba player.
Okay.
And, you know, I played a little bit of flute, sang in choirs, and, you know, and again, the point wasn't, I didn't think I was going to become a professional musician. It was just what you did.
Right.
And, you know, we went to here local orchestras, and there was, you know, we went to Baltimore for the opera or into DC for the opera, and it wasn't like we didn't do it, it wasn't like a fancy person thing at all. I really resent when people say that. I think it's, it was just what we did.
Yeah. Yeah, I've noticed, I mean, we have a very small community. You know, you can walk from one end to the other of the city pretty quickly.
I met everyone at Jackson Coffee Company.
Yeah.
Still have the card in my pocket.
For like such a small community, I would say we're definitely very proud of how big our orchestra is, how community minded it is. You know, we always try to give our musicians like a meal and create this community that you're talking about that can happen through music.
Hopefully you
So.
pay your musicians as well.
I mean, we do.
You don't just give them food.
They're professionals. You have to pay your musicians.
You have to. Yes. I like that the members of the community sort of, you know, feel open and free with the musicians. Obviously, that's important.
Yeah, it is important. Do you have a favorite composer?
Of course.
Who is it?
Bach.
Yeah?
Of course, Bach's my favorite composer.
Okay.
I mean, but you know, it doesn't mean he's the only composer.
No.
I mean,
You can
I
have a
listen to
favorite.
a massive variety of music. But of course, Bach for me is the pinnacle of music. But I
Yeah.
mean, if you had asked Bach, he probably would have named people that we don't even know today. So the whole idea of like, you know, the whole idea of a canon changes constantly. But yeah, of course it's Bach.
Yeah.
It always will be Bach. Yeah.
Yeah, nothing wrong with favorites, and that's a very good one. So when this album comes out, why, like, give me an elevator pitch. Why should I listen to this album?
There should be no non-musical reasons to listen to music. You should listen to music because you should listen to music. I don't know, why should you go see a painting you've never seen? Or why should you have a feeling that you've never felt, or hear a story you've never, because it has no purpose. Like, I mean, I don't make sort of grand claims on behalf of music. It doesn't feed children. It doesn't solve, you know, it doesn't cure cancer. It doesn't, you know, it's not gonna solve the climate crisis. Like, there's not, music exists because not everything has to have a purpose in order to be valid. You should listen to this album just as you listen to anything else. If you're going to listen to Beethoven and Brahms and Bach and all these other composers, okay, well, why would you not listen to Fernand de Kock? What about her was less valid to be listened to than everyone else? She did her work. She did it well. It's more than sufficient. That's what I would say.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think you've convinced me. I love listening to music, so.
I mean, I listen to all kinds of things, you know.
Yeah.
So.
Great. Well, thank you for
Thank you.
being here today.
Thanks.
I appreciate it.